Operate on this patient. I'll give you my salary." The doctor laughed. The nurse silenced him. Dorothy Johnson felt her heart racing as she ran through the cold hallways of City Memorial Hospital in Baltimore. Her hands trembled as she clutched the diagnosis papers she had just received, and the tears she tried to hold back blurred her vision. When she spotted the white coat of Dr. Richard Fitzgerald, the renowned chief surgeon, she didn't hesitate to desperately grab his sleeve. At 52, Dorothy knew he was her only son, her only family, and she would stop at nothing to save him. "Doctor, please, you have to listen to me," she said breathlessly, blocking the doctor's path in the hallway. Richard stopped abruptly, visibly annoyed by the interruption. At 45, he was known not only for his surgical skill, but also for his arrogance and coldness toward Medicaid patients. "What is this, woman? Can't you see I'm busy?" he replied, trying to pull away. "It's about my son, doctor. He's in the ER. He needs urgent surgery. The doctor said only you can do it, but there's a 3-month waiting list on Medicaid. My son doesn't have 3 months, doctor." Dorothy pulled the test results from her worn-out bag, extending them to Richard with shaking hands. "Look at these results. It's all documented. A rare stomach condition that's getting worse every day. Please, doctor, I'm begging you." Richard glanced briefly at the papers, immediately recognizing the severity of the case. It truly required his expertise, but his private schedule was already packed with paying patients. "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but there's a protocol. Your son will go on the waiting list like everyone else. I can't make exceptions." "Doctor, I've worked here for 15 years cleaning this hospital. I know you can make exceptions. I've seen it happen before. I'll give you my salary for the next 2 years, Dorothy said, kneeling in the middle of the hallway, ignoring the stares of other staff. The offer drew a mocking laugh from Richard. He crossed his arms and looked down at her with disdain. 2 years of your salary? He said, still laughing. "Ma'am, your son's surgery costs more than you make in 5 years. You think I'll rearrange my schedule for that ridiculous amount?" The words hit Dorothy like physical blows. She clung to the doctor's legs, sobbing as she pleaded. "Then tell me what I need to do, doctor. I'll sell my house, work for you for free. Do anything. Just don't let my son die." Richard was still laughing when he felt a strong presence behind him. Head nurse Margaret Wilson approached with firm steps, her 62 years radiating authority and experience. "Dr. Fitzgerald," she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "We need to talk. Now." Margaret's tone silenced Richard instantly. There was something in her gaze he recognized, something that reminded him of times he'd rather forget. "Margaret, this isn't your business," he replied, trying to keep his composure. "Of course it's my business. This woman is my employee, and you're humiliating her in the middle of my hospital. We'll talk in private." Margaret helped Dorothy up, whispering words of comfort in her ear. "It'll be okay, Dorothy. Trust me. Go be with your son. I'll handle this." Richard hesitated for a moment, but something in Margaret's determined stare made him relent. They walked silently to the nurse's station, where she shut the door firmly behind them. "What the hell was that, Richard?" Margaret said, crossing her arms. "You know exactly how things work here. I can't just operate on everyone out of turn because you asked." "Oh, you can't? Funny, because last week you operated on Councilman Reynolds' daughter out of turn, and last month it was Judge Thompson's wife. But when it's a poor cleaning lady, suddenly you hide behind protocol." Richard felt a chill in his stomach. Margaret knew everything that happened in that hospital, and he had underestimated just how far her knowledge went. "That's different, Margaret. You know it is. Different because they have money and influence, and Dorothy only has a mother's heart." Margaret stepped closer, locking eyes with him. "Richard, I've known you a long time. Remember when you were a resident and I was your supervisor? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, back to it." Richard's face paled. Margaret was referring to a period he'd tried to erase from his memory when he was still learning and made mistakes that could have cost lives. "Margaret, that was over 20 years ago. And you think I forgot? Remember patient Williams, Richard? That 60-year-old man who came in with heart attack symptoms And you insisted it was just indigestion because he'd been drinking at the hospital party. Richard clenched his fists. That was a wound that had never fully healed. I was young, inexperienced. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, but not everyone falsifies records to cover them up. I saw you altering that man's file, Richard. I saw you changing times, symptoms, everything to make it look like you'd followed the right protocol. Margaret, for God's sake. And you know what else I know? That you weren't alone in that cover-up. The chairman of the Regional Medical Board, your friend William Parker, helped you bury it all. And to this day, you two protect each other. Richard sank heavily into his chair. Margaret had touched the most vulnerable point of his career, the secret that could destroy not just his reputation, but that of powerful people. What do you want, Margaret? I want you to operate on Dorothy's son today. And if I refuse, Margaret smiled coldly, then I'll have a very interesting conversation with the hospital's ethics board, and I'm sure the press would love to know how the favor system works among this city's influential doctors. Richard knew he was cornered. Margaret wasn't one to bluff, and she had enough information to ruin his career and several other important people's. Fine, Margaret, I'll operate on the boy, but it'll cost his mother dearly. How much? $200,000, and she'll work for me unpaid for 5 years to pay off the rest. Margaret took a deep breath. It was an absurd amount, far beyond what Dorothy could afford, but she couldn't let this chance slip away. I have a counteroffer, Richard. I'll pay $100,000 out of my own pocket, and Dorothy works for you for just 1 year. Unpaid. You have $100,000, Margaret. I do. It's my life savings from working here all these years. Money I was setting aside for retirement. Richard was stunned by the nurse's determination. He knew Margaret had always been a woman of principle, but he hadn't expected her to go this far. Why would you do this for some random employee? Because there's no such thing as some random employee, Richard. Dorothy has a name, a story, a son who needs her, and because someone needs to remind you what it means to be a doctor. For several minutes, they stared at each other in silence. Richard mentally relived the early years of his career when he still had ideals and dreamed of saving lives. Margaret, on the other hand, thought of all the years she had dedicated to that hospital, watching doctors drift further and further from the essence of medicine. All right, Margaret, I accept your proposal, but on one condition. I choose the surgery date. When? Tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock. Margaret nodded, feeling a mix of relief and worry. She had gotten what she wanted, but she knew Richard wasn't a man to forgive humiliation easily. When they returned to the hallway, Dorothy was still in the emergency waiting room holding the hand of her 18-year-old son, Tyler. The young man was pale and visibly weak, but tried to reassure his mother. "Mom, stay calm. Everything will be fine," Tyler said, squeezing her hand. "My boy, you don't understand how serious this is. The doctors said the problem gets worse with each passing day." Margaret approached them with a tired smile. "Dorothy, I have good news. Dr. Richard will operate on your son tomorrow morning." Dorothy jumped from her chair, hugging Margaret tightly. "Margaret, how did you manage this? What did you do? That doesn't matter now. What matters is that Tyler will be okay." "But how much will it cost?" "I don't have money for a private surgery." Margaret took a deep breath before answering. "You'll work for Dr. Richard for a year without pay, and I'll help with the medical costs." Dorothy felt her legs weaken. A year without pay meant she'd have to rely on friends and the church to survive, but it was a price she'd pay without hesitation for her son's life. "Margaret, I don't know how to thank you. You're saving my boy's life." "You don't have to thank me, Dorothy. Just take good care of him." Tyler, who had heard the whole conversation, took Margaret's hand. "Miss Margaret, I promise that when I graduate, I'll repay everything you're doing for us." "Graduate in what, my boy?" "Medicine. I want to be a doctor like Dr. Richard, but a doctor who never forgets where he came from." Margaret smiled, seeing in the young man the hope of a more compassionate kind of medicine. That night, Dorothy couldn't sleep. She stayed by Tyler's hospital bed, watching his labored breathing and praying that everything would go well with the surgery. "Mom, You need to rest, Tyler said, noticing her red eyes. How can I rest, my boy? Tomorrow you're having a risky surgery. Mom, I trust Dr. Richard. He's the best surgeon in the city. I know, my love. I'm just afraid of losing you. You're all I have in this world. Tyler squeezed his mother's hand firmly. Mom, remember when I was little and had pneumonia? You told me God never gives us a cross heavier than we can bear. This is our cross now, and we'll carry it together. Dorothy smiled through her tears, proud of her son's maturity. You're right, my love. Let's trust that everything will work out. Meanwhile, in Richard's luxurious apartment, the surgeon couldn't focus on anything. His conversation with Margaret had stirred up old scars he'd tried to keep buried. He went to his office and opened a locked drawer, pulling out a yellowed folder. Inside were documents he hadn't seen in years, the original medical file of patient Williams before the changes he had made. Richard reread each page, recalling the details of that terrible night. Mr. Williams had arrived at the hospital with clear signs of a heart attack, but Richard, then an arrogant resident, insisted it was just indigestion because he didn't want to call the supervisor. By the time he realized his mistake, it was too late, and the patient had been left in critical condition. To cover up his negligence, Richard altered the medical records with the help of William Parker, who at the time was the on-duty doctor and now was the president of the Regional Medical Board. They changed times, symptoms, and procedures to make it seem like everything had been done correctly. Mr. Williams survived, but was left with severe heart complications that stayed with him for the rest of his life. Richard never saw him again, but he knew he had destroyed that man's quality of life because of his arrogance. That memory haunted him in moments of silence when he couldn't hide behind work and status. Margaret had reopened a wound that never fully healed. The next day at 6 in the morning, Dorothy was at the hospital getting Tyler ready for surgery. The young man tried to appear brave, but she could see the fear in his eyes. Mom, if something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, Tyler. Don't talk like that. But if it does, I want you to know you were the best mom in the world. You gave up everything for me, never remarried, because you wanted to focus on raising me. Dorothy felt tears threatening to fall again. Tyler, stop that. You'll be fine. You'll graduate from medical school and take care of so many people. This is our story, and it's going to have a happy ending. At exactly 7 o'clock, Richard arrived at the hospital. Margaret was already there overseeing Tyler's preparations for surgery. Good morning, doctor, she said in a professional yet firm tone. Good morning, Margaret. Is the patient ready? He is. But before we begin, I need to tell you something important. Richard stopped what he was doing and looked at her. What is it? Last night I looked into Tyler's history in the hospital archives. 18 years ago, a woman gave birth here and abandoned the baby. She left only a letter asking someone to take good care of the child. Richard felt a strange chill run down his spine. So, what does that have to do with me? The woman's name was Samantha Cooper. She was a surgery resident here at the hospital. The name hit Richard like lightning. Samantha had been his residency colleague, and they'd had a brief but intense relationship about 19 years ago. Margaret, are you implying that? I'm not implying anything, I'm just telling you the facts. Samantha left medicine after a scandal here at the hospital. She reported harassment by a senior doctor, but no one believed her. Her career was destroyed, and she disappeared from the city. Richard felt his legs weaken. He vaguely remembered the scandal involving Samantha, but at the time, he'd been so focused on his own career that he hadn't paid much attention. Why are you telling me this now? Because you have the right to know, and because, if Tyler really is your son, you'll understand better why this surgery is so important. Richard looked through the glass door of the operating room where Tyler was being prepped by the nurses. For the first time, he really studied the young man's features, the dark eyes, the shape of his face, the nervous way he smiled. Margaret, even if he were my son, it wouldn't change anything. I'm doing this surgery because you forced me, not out of sentimentality. I know, Richard. I just thought you should know. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The surgery began promptly at 8 in the morning. Richard, though unsettled by the revelations, managed to maintain his professional focus. Margaret observed the entire procedure from the viewing room, where Dorothy was also sitting, whispering prayers without pause. "Margaret, do you think everything will be all right?" Dorothy asked, clutching a rosary in her hands. "Dr. Richard is truly an excellent surgeon, Dorothy. Technically, he's one of the best I've ever seen. But you said he's not a good person." Being a good doctor and a good person are different things, unfortunately. Richard has his flaws, but in the operating room he's skilled. During the first 2 hours, everything went as planned. Richard made precise incisions, following the protocol he'd studied the night before exactly. But when he opened Tyler's abdominal cavity, he encountered something unexpected. "Margaret, can you come here?" he called over the intercom. Margaret entered the operating room, already properly suited up. What happened? The problem is worse than the initial diagnosis showed. There's a perforation that didn't appear in the scans, and it's causing an internal infection. Margaret assessed the situation and immediately understood its severity. "Does this change the procedure?" "Completely. It's no longer a simple surgery. I need to perform an intestinal resection and then reconstruction. That's at least 4 more hours of surgery." "Can you do it?" Richard hesitated. It was a complex procedure, one he'd performed only a few times in his career. A mistake could be fatal for Tyler. "Margaret, I need to be honest with you. This surgery is beyond my specialty. The best option would be to transfer the patient to New York City, to a specialist in digestive surgery." "How long would that take?" 2 hours to arrange everything, plus 2 hours for transport. 4 hours total." Margaret looked at Tyler on the operating table. The young man was exposed, vulnerable, relying entirely on medical skill to survive. "Richard, he won't last 4 hours. You know that." "I know. But if I attempt the surgery and it goes wrong, and if you don't try, he definitely won't make it." The two locked eyes for a tense moment. Richard felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, but also something he hadn't felt in years, the chance to truly save a life for the right reasons. "Margaret, I'll need your help. Do you know intestinal reconstruction techniques?" "I do. I studied surgery extensively when I was younger. It was my dream to be a doctor." "Why didn't you pursue medicine?" Margaret gave a bitter smile. "Because when I applied to medical school 40 years ago, the admissions director told me a poor woman from the outskirts didn't have the intellect for medicine, that I should stick to nursing." Richard felt another blow to his conscience. He knew exactly who the admissions director had been because he'd taken over the position years later, himself. "Margaret, do you remember that director's name?" "Of course I do. Professor Richard Fitzgerald Sr., your father." The revelation hit Richard like a punch to the gut. His father had denied Margaret her dream, and now he was relying on her to save a life. "Margaret, That doesn't matter now, Richard. What matters is saving this boy. Will you let me help?" Richard nodded, feeling a strange humility he hadn't known in decades. "Margaret, guide me. You've studied this more than I have." For the next 5 hours, Richard and Margaret worked together like never before. Margaret directed Richard's every move, applying knowledge she'd gained from years of self-study, dreaming of a career she'd been denied. "Now you need to perform the anastomosis in 2 layers, Margaret instructed. "First, the mucosal layer, then the ceremuscular." "How do you know this so well?" "Because I never stopped studying medicine, Richard. All these years working as a nurse, I kept buying medical books, watching surgeries whenever possible, learning new techniques." "Why? If you knew you could never practice." "Because I still had hope that one day things would change, and maybe also because I wanted to prove your father wrong about me." At 2 in the afternoon, when the complications seemed resolved, a new problem arose. Tyler began showing signs of shock, his blood pressure dropping dangerously low. "Margaret, he's going into hypervolemic shock," said Richard, trying to control the panic in his voice. "Is it blood loss?" There must be a bleeding vessel we missed. I need to find it fast. Margaret watched the monitors and the surgical field closely. Richard, look there at the back of the mesentery. There's a small pulse. Richard followed Margaret's gaze and found the tiny bleeding vessel causing the internal hemorrhage. How did you see that? I didn't even notice. 40 years of observing surgeries teaches you to spot details others miss. Richard managed to stop the bleeding and stabilize Tyler, but the surgery had already lasted over 6 hours. He was exhausted, but Margaret remained steady by his side. Margaret, aren't you tired? I am, but I can't give up now. This boy represents everything I ever wanted to do in medicine. Save lives with knowledge and dedication. What if I had let you into medical school 40 years ago? Maybe today I'd be a better surgeon than you, she said with an ironic smile. Richard laughed, feeling something close to genuine humility for the first time in a long while. Maybe you would. Finally, at 4 in the afternoon, the surgery was completed. Tyler was stable. The intestinal reconstruction had been successful, and his vitals showed the worst was over. When they stepped out of the operating room, Dorothy was in the hallway, accompanied by several cleaning co-workers who had come to support her. "Doctor, how's my son?" she asked, rushing toward them. "The surgery was a success, Dorothy," Richard replied, removing his mask. "It was more complicated than we expected, but Tyler will be fine." Dorothy fell to her knees, crying with relief. The other women hugged her, celebrating alongside her. "Doctor, how can I ever thank you?" Dorothy said, still weeping. "You don't need to thank me. The one you should thank is Margaret. She saved your son today." Dorothy looked at Margaret with endless gratitude. "Margaret, you're an angel sent by God." "I'm no angel, Dorothy. Just a nurse who knows medicine." Over the following days, Tyler recovered quickly. Richard visited his room daily, initially out of medical duty, but gradually developing a genuine interest in the young man. "How are you feeling today, Tyler?" Richard asked during one visit. "Much better, Doctor. The pain has eased a lot." "Your mother told me you want to study medicine." "I do. After what you did for me, I'm sure I want to save lives too." Richard felt a tightness in his chest. Tyler's genuine admiration reminded him why he had chosen medicine so many years ago. "Tyler, medicine isn't just about technique. You need compassion, humility to admit mistakes, and above all, never forget that every patient is a person with a family, dreams, and fears." "Were you always like this?" Richard hesitated before answering. "No, Tyler, I lost my way. Arrogance and money took over. But your mother and Margaret reminded me what really matters." "How so?" "Your mother showed me what unconditional love is. She was willing to sacrifice everything for you. And Margaret showed me that knowledge and dedication are more important than titles and money." Tyler reflected on the doctor's words. "Doctor, can I ask you a personal question?" "Go ahead." "Why did you change your attitude toward me and my mom?" "At first you were really harsh." Richard took a deep breath, deciding to be honest with the young man. "Because I had forgotten how to be human, Tyler. Financial success and professional recognition made me believe I was better than other people, but your mother and Margaret showed me I was wrong." "And now?" "Now I want to try to be a better doctor, and a better person too." Meanwhile, Margaret was at home organizing her financial documents. She had used all her savings to help with Tyler's surgery and now needed to adjust her life for the coming years. Her younger sister, Meredith, had come to visit and was worried about her decision. "Margaret, have you lost your mind? You spent 40 years of savings on someone who isn't even family." "Meredith, you don't understand. This boy represents everything I ever wanted to do in medicine. But you're a nurse, not a doctor. What obligation do you have to him?" Margaret stopped sorting the papers and looked at her sister. "Meredith, 18 years ago, I helped care for a woman who gave birth here at the hospital and abandoned her baby. She was desperate, said she couldn't raise the child." "So what?" "That woman's name was Samantha Cooper. She was a resident doctor but had been expelled from the hospital after reporting harassment. No one believed her. Her career was destroyed." Meredith began to understand where her sister was going. "Margaret, are you saying that—" "I'm saying Tyler is that woman's son, and I've always known because I was there the day he was born." "Why did you never tell him?" Because Dorothy is his real mother. She's the one who raised him, loved him, gave up everything for him. Motherhood isn't just biological, Meredith. But his birth mother was a victim of an unfair system. Samantha was a brilliant doctor, but she was destroyed because she reported a powerful man. She had no choice but to leave her son. Meredith fell silent, processing the information. And you think the boy's father? I suspect it's Richard himself. They dated back then and the timeline matches, but that's just my speculation. Margaret, if that's true, you saved the son of the man who humiliated you the most at that hospital. Exactly. And do you know why? Because doing what's right doesn't depend on who the person is. It depends on what's fair. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. A week after the surgery, Richard made a decision that surprised everyone. He called Dorothy and Margaret to a meeting in his office. "Dorothy, I have something to tell you," he began, visibly nervous. "Yes, doctor. I've decided to cancel our agreement. You won't work for me without pay." Dorothy was confused. "But doctor, we had a deal. I have no other way to pay for the surgery." "The surgery is already paid for, Dorothy. I won't charge you anything." "What do you mean?" Richard glanced at Margaret before continuing. "Because I found out something that changes everything. Tyler is my biological son." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Dorothy's legs weakened and she gripped the chair. "Doctor, how can you be sure?" "I ran a DNA test with samples taken during the surgery. The results came back yesterday. Tyler is my son." Dorothy began to cry, not from sadness but from a mix of relief, fear and confusion. "Doctor, does this mean you'll take him from me?" "No, Dorothy. You're his mother. You raised him, educated him, gave him love, and dedicated your life to him. I only contributed biologically. So what does that change?" "It changes that I want to help in his upbringing. I want to pay for his medical school, provide financial support for you both, and most of all, I want to learn to be a better father." Margaret, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Richard, have you told Tyler about this?" "Not yet. I wanted to talk to both of you first, but I plan to tell him. He has the right to know." "And how will you explain that you never knew he existed?" "With the truth, that his birth mother was a victim of injustices in this hospital, including injustices I helped perpetuate. And that only now do I understand the gravity of what happened." Dorothy wiped her tears and looked directly at Richard. "Doctor, if you're going to tell Tyler you're his father, I have one condition." "What is it?" "That you never try to replace the place I hold in his life. I am his mother, and that will never change. Dorothy, I don't want to replace you, I want to add to his life. Tyler was lucky to have a mother like you." That afternoon, Richard went to Tyler's hospital room. The young man was sitting on the bed reading a biology book Margaret had lent him. "Hi, doctor. Just studying a bit." "Tyler, I need to talk to you about something important." The young man closed the book and paid attention. "Is it about the surgery?" "No. It's about you, about your family." Richard told the whole story, about Samantha, the abandonment, the DNA test. Tyler listened in silence, processing every word. "So you're my biological father?" he finally asked. "I am. But that doesn't change anything about your mother. Dorothy is your real mother." "I know that, doctor. No one will ever take my mother's place in my heart." "And how do you feel knowing this about me?" Tyler thought for a moment. "Honestly, confused. Because my whole life, I imagined what my biological father would be like. But I never imagined it'd be someone I already knew. And now that you know, now I understand better why you changed so much during my surgery, and I understand why Mrs. Margaret seemed to know something we didn't. Tyler, I want you to know I intend to take responsibility as your father, but at whatever pace you're comfortable with." "What does that mean in practice?" "It means I'll pay for your medical school, provide financial support for you and your mother, and I'll be there whenever you need me. But as a father who came late, not as someone trying to completely change your life." Tyler reached out his hand to Richard. "Doctor, Dad, I think we can try to build a new relationship, but slowly. Richard shook his son's hand, feeling an emotion he hadn't experienced in decades. 3 months later, Tyler was fully discharged and completely recovered. The family dynamic had changed entirely. Richard visited Dorothy and Tyler regularly, always with respect and humility. "Mom, look," Tyler said, walking into the living room with a letter in his hand. "What is it, son?" "My application for the pre-med prep course got accepted. Dr. Richard paid for the whole thing." Dorothy smiled, proud of her son and grateful for Richard's change. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You deserve it." "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Does it bother you that Dr. Richard is my father?" Dorothy hugged her son. "Tyler, I just want you to be happy. If having your biological father in your life makes you happy, then I'm happy too. But you don't feel jealous." "Sometimes a little," she admitted, laughing. "But then, I remember I had you all to myself for 18 years, and now you have one more person to love you. How could I be mad about that?" Meanwhile, at the hospital, Margaret was going through important changes in her career. Richard had proposed something she never imagined, returning to medical school. "Margaret, you're 52. It's not too late to follow your dream," Richard said in his office. "Richard, I'm over 60. Who would accept a student my age?" "I spoke to the dean of the medical school. I explained your story, your practical experience, and your dedication. They agreed to make an exception." "What do you mean?" "You can start directly in your 3rd year because of your hands-on experience. Just 4 more years of study, and you'll graduate as a doctor at 66. Margaret fell silent, trying to process the information. "Richard, why are you doing this?" "Because it's fair. My father denied your dream 40 years ago out of prejudice. I want to make that right. And how will I support myself during school?" "The hospital will give you a full scholarship, plus a monthly stipend. You'll study and keep working part-time." Margaret felt tears streaming down her face. "Richard, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just accept the opportunity you always deserved." 6 months later, everyone's lives had completely changed. Tyler was in prep school, studying for medical school. Dorothy had landed a better job in hospital administration thanks to Richard's recommendation. Margaret was in medical school and one of the top students in her class. Richard had changed too. He overhauled the hospital's care system, created a scholarship program for staff to further their education, and began performing free surgeries for low-income patients. "Dr. Richard," a young nurse said, entering his office. "Yes?" "There's a woman here to see you. She said it's about Tyler." Richard's heart raced. Could it be Samantha? "Send her in." The woman who walked in was an older version of the Samantha he'd known during his residency. She was nervous but determined. "Richard." "Samantha, after all these years. I heard you operated on my son, and that you found out you're his father." "How did you know?" "Margaret called me. She told me everything." Richard stood, unsure how to react. "Samantha, I didn't know you were pregnant when you left the hospital." "I know, and I'm not here to demand anything. I'm here to thank you." "Thank me?" "For saving his life, and for stepping up as his father." "Samantha, I need to apologize for how you were treated at this hospital, for the injustice you suffered." "Richard, that was a long time ago. What matters is that our son now has both families, the one that raised him with love, and his biological one for support. Do you want to meet him?" "I do, but on his terms. No rush, no pressure." "And you? How's your life?" "I moved to the countryside, got married, and run a veterinary clinic. I never practiced human medicine again, but I didn't leave healthcare completely." "Were you happy?" "I was. And you?" Richard thought about the question. "I thought I was happy, but now I know I was just successful. Happiness came just a few months ago when I learned to be human again." 2 years later, Tyler was in his 2nd year of medical school. The family had grown harmoniously. Dorothy remained his primary mother, Richard took on the role of a present but respectful father, and Samantha became a close friend who visited regularly. Margaret was in her final year of medical school, shining as one of the best students the school had ever seen. Her story had inspired other hospital staff who dreamed of changing careers. "Margaret, how does it feel to be almost a doctor after all these years?" Tyler asked during one of their Sunday family dinners. "I feel fulfilled, Tyler. But you know what makes me happiest?" "What?" "It's seeing that all the hardships we went through served a purpose. Your surgery changed all of us for the better." "How so?" "Your father learned to be human. I fulfilled my dream of becoming a doctor. Your mother got a better job and you discovered there are more people to love you." Richard, who had been listening to the conversation, added, "And the hospital became a more humane place. We created the patient-centered care program, scholarships for staff, and the free surgery system." Dorothy smiled, looking at her expanded family. "Do you know what I think about all this?" "What, Mom?" "That sometimes God allows us to go through hardships to teach us important lessons. If Tyler hadn't gotten sick, none of this would have happened." "You're right, Dorothy," said Richard. "That surgery saved me just as much as it saved Tyler." "Saved you how, Dad?" "It saved me from remaining an arrogant and empty person. It taught me that professional success without humanity is worthless. And it taught me," added Margaret, "that it's never too late to chase your dreams even when others say it's impossible." Tyler looked around the table, seeing his mother, Dorothy, his father, Richard, his aunt, Margaret, who was graduating as a doctor, and occasionally Samantha, who was gradually reconnecting with everyone. "Do you know what my biggest dream is now?" he said. "What?" they all asked together. "To become a doctor and work in this very hospital, but helping to preserve everything you all built. I want other underprivileged kids to have the same opportunities I had." "And you'll do it, my son," said Dorothy proudly. "Of course you will," Richard agreed. "You've got the genetics of 2 doctors, but most importantly, you were raised by a mother who taught you values many doctors lack." "And you'll have Dr. Margaret supervising you," Tyler joked. "The nurse who became a doctor and knows more than many doctors out there." Everyone laughed, celebrating not just the transformation of their lives, but especially the fact that they had discovered true medicine wasn't just about technical knowledge. It was about seeing every patient as a human being worthy of care and respect. 5 years later, Tyler graduated as a doctor with honors. On graduation day, his whole family was there. Dorothy, beaming with pride. Richard, moved by the son he had learned to love. Margaret, who had become a respected general surgery specialist. And Samantha, who had become a loving biological grandmother. "Son, say something to us," Dorothy asked during the graduation party. Tyler stood up, emotional. "I want to thank all of you for teaching me that medicine isn't just science, it's art, it's compassion, it's humility. My mother Dorothy taught me never to forget where I came from. My father Richard taught me it's possible to change and become a better person. Dr. Margaret taught me that knowledge without humility is worthless. And Samantha taught me that sometimes letting go is the greatest act of love." "And what's your plan now?" Richard asked. "To do my residency in general surgery, right here at City Memorial Hospital, where it all began." "Why?" Margaret asked. "Because this is where I learned that a hospital isn't just a place to cure diseases. It's a place to heal people, and people aren't just bodies. They're human beings with stories, families, dreams, and fears." "And what will you specialize in?" "Digestive system surgery, the same specialty that saved my life. I want to do for other kids what you all did for me." Dorothy hugged her son, crying with emotion. "My son, you don't know how proud I am." "Mom, if I made it this far, it's because you never gave up on me. Even when things looked hopeless, you believed I'd survive." "And I was right," she said, smiling through her tears. Richard approached the two. "Tyler, Dorothy, I have a proposal for you." "What is it?" "How about the 3 of us start a social project at the hospital? A program that offers free surgeries for families in need, but also includes psychological support, social assistance, and health education." "What a beautiful idea, Richard," said Margaret. "And what's the project's name?" asked Tyler. Richard smiled. "The Hope Project, because that's what you gave back to me. Hope in humanity." Dorothy hugged Richard, now fully considering him part of the family. "Richard, you've become the man I always knew you could be." "How did you know?" "Because no one becomes a doctor by accident. Somewhere inside you there was always the desire to help people. It was just hidden beneath the arrogance." 2 years later, the Hope Project had become a national model. Doctors from all over the country visited City Memorial Hospital to learn about compassionate care. Tyler, now a second-year resident, coordinated the program alongside Margaret, who had become the head of general surgery. Richard remained chief surgeon, but with a completely transformed approach. "Dr. Tyler," said a nurse during a shift. "Yes?" "There's a family in the emergency room. The mother is desperate because her son needs urgent surgery but can't afford it." Tyler smiled, remembering his own story. "Send them to my office. I'll talk to them." When the family entered his office, Tyler saw a scene that took him back 8 years: a desperate mother, a sick young boy, and lack of money as the barrier between life and hope. "Ma'am, tell me what's going on," Tyler said gently. "Doctor, my son has the same condition a young boy had here years ago. The doctors said only you can operate because you specialize in this." "And what's your son's name?" "Jason. Jason Williams." A chill ran down Tyler's spine. Williams was the last name of the patient his father had neglected so many years ago, the one that haunted him during sleepless nights. "Ma'am, by any chance, was your father-in-law's name Robert Williams?" "Yes, he was my father-in-law. He passed away a few years ago, but he always talked about a doctor who almost didn't treat him properly here at the hospital long ago." Tyler took a deep breath, realizing life had given his family a new chance to right a past wrong. "Ma'am, your son will have his surgery for free through the Hope Project, and he'll receive all the necessary follow-up care until he fully recovers." "But doctor, we can't afford—" "You don't understand. It's completely free. No costs, no strings attached." The woman began to cry in relief, just as his own mother had years ago. "Doctor, how can I thank you?" "You don't have to thank me. Just take good care of Jason, and when he grows up, teach him the importance of helping others. You can count on me, doctor. And one more thing, ma'am. Your father-in-law, Robert, was right. He really was mistreated here years ago. But today we make sure that never happens again." When the family left, Tyler called Richard. "Dad, you need to hear this." "What is it, son?" "A patient just came in. Jason Williams, grandson of Robert Williams." On the other end of the line, Richard was silent for a few seconds. "The Robert Williams Yes, the same one." "Tyler, this is a golden opportunity." "How so?" "It's our chance to do for his grandson everything I should have done for his grandfather. We'll operate on this boy with all the care and dedication in the world. I've already scheduled the surgery for tomorrow, Dad, and you know what else?" "What?" "I'm going to ask Dr. Margaret to assist me. So the three of us will be together saving the grandson of the man you couldn't properly save years ago." "Son, you make me proud every day. That's how a family should be, Dad. One correcting the mistakes of the others and building something better together." Jason's surgery was an absolute success. Throughout the procedure, Richard remembered Robert Williams and how his youthful arrogance had harmed that man. Now he was saving the grandson with all the skill and care he should have given the grandfather. "Tyler, how does it feel operating on the grandson of the first patient who taught me about humility?" Richard asked during the surgery. "It feels like we're closing a circle, Dad. Fixing the past and building a better future. And you, Margaret? I'm happy to be alive to see you both become the doctors I always dreamed you'd be." 6 months after Jason's surgery, City Memorial Hospital received a special visit, a delegation of foreign doctors who wanted to learn about the famous Hope Project. "Dr. Richard," said the leader of the delegation, "how did you manage to turn a public hospital into a global reference for compassionate care?" Richard looked at Tyler and Margaret, who stood beside him during the presentation. "The answer is simple. We learned that medicine isn't just about technique. It's mostly about love for others." "But how did you come to that conclusion?" "Through a painful lesson. A few years ago, I was a technically skilled doctor but lacking in humanity. Until a desperate mother taught me about unconditional love, and a nurse taught me about humility and dedication. And how did that change the hospital? Tyler answered, when my father transformed, he inspired other doctors to change too. We created protocols that demand not just technical competence, but also compassionate care. And does it work? Margaret added. It works because patients feel welcomed, families trust doctors more, and the professionals themselves feel more fulfilled in their work. Can you share this model with us? Of course, Richard replied. Knowledge should be shared. We'll provide all our protocols, training, and methodologies. Free of charge? Of course, just as medicine should be accessible to all who need it. 2 years later, City Memorial Hospital's model had been replicated in over 50 hospitals across the United States. Tyler had become a respected surgeon. Margaret was one of the most admired doctors in the region, and Richard had become a national reference for hospital compassion. Dorothy, now working in the hospital's social responsibility department, organized a special event, the 10th anniversary of the Hope Project. Everyone, she said, gathering the whole family, do you want to know how many lives we've changed in these 10 years? How many, Mom? Over 5,000 free surgeries performed. 300 hospital staff received scholarships to study. 50 hospitals across the country adopted our model, and most importantly, thousands of families were treated with dignity and respect. Mom, do you know which statistic makes me proudest? Tyler said. Which one? 0 complaints of mistreatment in the last 5 years. Our hospital has become synonymous with compassionate care. Richard hugged Dorothy and Tyler. You know I owe all of this to you, right? How so? Dorothy asked. If you hadn't confronted me with your pain as a mother, if Margaret hadn't forced me to see my arrogance, if Tyler hadn't given me the chance to be a father, I would never have changed. Richard, Margaret said, the ability to change was always inside you. We just helped you find it. And now, what's your next dream? Tyler looked at everyone before answering. My dream is that 20 years from now, when I'm head of surgery, no young doctor will make the mistakes you made in the past, that they learn early on that medicine is science with humanity. And my dream, said Margaret, is to train a new generation of doctors who understand that every patient is a unique person with a story, a family, and dignity. And I, said Dorothy, dream that no mother goes through the despair I did, that every family is treated with respect, no matter their social status. Richard was moved as he listened to his family's dreams. Can, do you know what my dream is? What? That our family's story inspires other families to believe in the human capacity for change, that our experience proves it's never too late to become a better person. 10 years after that desperate day when Dorothy begged for her son's life, they were gathered together, celebrating not just Tyler's recovery, but the complete transformation of a family and an entire hospital. Do you know what makes me happiest? Dorothy said, looking at everyone. What, Mom? That our suffering wasn't in vain. Every tear I shed, every sleepless night, every moment of despair, it all served to build something bigger than our own lives. How so? Because if Tyler hadn't gotten sick, Richard would never have changed. If Richard hadn't changed, the hospital would never have transformed, and if the hospital hadn't transformed, thousands of other families wouldn't have been helped. Tyler hugged his mother. Mom, you've always been wise, but now you're philosophical too. That's what age teaches you, my son. It teaches you that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as problems. And it also teaches, Margaret added, that we should never give up on our dreams, no matter how old we are. And that a person can change completely, Richard said, as long as they have the humility to admit their mistakes and the courage to be different. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story of transformation and perseverance. Have you experienced anything similar in your life or in the lives of those close to you? Leave your honest thoughts and share your reflections on second chances and change. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories.